Welcome back to another beautiful day in the land of music. My name is Douglas, and today we're going to be comparing the Roland V-Stage and the Yamaha YC. So I have the V-Stage 76 semi-weighted, beautiful waterfall style keys. And on the YC, I have the YC 88, which is the weighted keybed from this version or this series of keyboards. I'm trying to get my hands on an 88 key V-Stage so I can do a key feel comparison, but we're not going to talk about that in today's comparison. What we are going to focus on are sounds and features. From a sound perspective, we're going to turn all effects off, so we're hearing a dry sound from both of these keyboards. I feel like that's a really good place to start a comparison, is with a dry sound. Effects can enhance and change sounds, so I'm leaving those out for this comparison. I'll do other videos where I just focus on a certain section and talk about some of the presets that come already built with a keyboard, as well as more in-depth control and comparison between these different keyboards. So while I get these powered on, let's talk about my setup here a little bit, because I want to make sure that I'm giving both of these a fair shake. So I'm going left and right 1/4 inch out of both of these, stereo on both, into my Focusrite audio interface line input. That's going into Pro Tools, raw audio, no post-processing, EQ, or anything like that. What you're hearing is what's coming out of these keyboards. And then I have a sustain pedal plugged into the hold control pedal input of the V-Stage and a sustain pedal plugged into the sustain port of the YC. Before we test out any sounds, I want to just talk control panel really quick, as well as build quality and look and feel. So from a section perspective, they're very similar. Pitch and mod moving to the organ section. You have the piano section, which we've got a keys section here. And then on the V-Stage, you have a dedicated electric piano and synthesizer parts or sections. On the YC, your keys section is really your combination of 2 layers for pianos, electric piano, synth, or other samples. So we'll talk about the functionality and feature differences. Layering is going to be one that the V-Stage can do quite a bit more on. When we compare the feel of these keyboards and the build quality, they both have metal chassis. The knobs on the V-Stage have a little bit of a rubberized feel to them, whereas on the YC, they are a glossy plastic, still solid feeling. The interesting thing with the knobs on the YC is almost all the knobs, with the exception of your master equalizer and some of the selector knobs, have you can see the LED indicator there, and on the screen we also get a readout of the precise value. Whereas on the V-Stage, you have LED indicators on some of them, like the level for each of your parts, but it doesn't show a readout on the screen for the exact value, which is kind of interesting when you think about needing to set, particular volumes of your different parts or your different layers. So I wish it had a readout on the screen. Maybe that's something they could add with an OS update. Coming back to the YC, the buttons here within this live set section have a little bit of a rubbery feel to them. They're not as clicky as some of the plastic ones, but then here in the sections, the black ones essentially are clicky buttons. Coming up to the V-Stage, all of the buttons have a pretty clicky feel to them. They're this plastic, and then the drawbars are a glossy plastic on the V-Stage. They're a glossy plastic on the YC. The YC drawbars are a little bit of a different shape. They both have LEDs, and the interesting thing with the YC is I feel like there's a little bit more resistance, and it clicks as you're bringing that up and down, whereas it's smooth with the V-Stage. I feel like the V-Stage has a touch, maybe a touch smaller or shorter throw on the drawbars than you do on the YC. I don't know which I like better. I think I'm gonna have to play with it more to determine. I like the clicky nature of the drawbars on the YC, and I like that they're just slightly bigger. I find these a little bit tough to grab on the V-Stage. So overall, I think the build quality on both of these is very similar. The big difference in the different parts and the sections. So on the V-Stage, the organ, piano, electric piano, and synthesizer are called parts, these sections. Here on the YC, we have that same concept, but we've got these little metal toggles to turn the different parts on and off, whereas we have on-off buttons here underneath our level knob for the V-Stage. So the last thing before we compare sounds is over on the left, you have a pitch wheel and a modulation wheel. The YC has these funky little metal toggle things. I feel like they're just gonna break off, though they haven't yet, but I prefer the wheel over these little toggle pieces here. So let's start with the organ. I'm gonna turn the organ section on here. Start with percussion off, the effects off. We'll get all of that. And we're gonna take rotary off as well. If we play a couple of notes here and we bring in the drawbar, starting with the 16 foot up to the 1 foot, let's hear what the raw B3 sound sounds like on the V-Stage. Coming back to the YC, let's turn the organ section on and make sure the speaker's off. Bring our drawbars all the way back and do the same thing. Let's turn the rotary speaker on. That's on the slow speed. And then the same thing on the YC. I like on the V-Stage that you have these rotary buttons here, these big rubbery buttons, and make it really easy to reach up. Now, the keys on the 88 makes it hard because they're really geared towards piano playing. We've got a few different types of organs here on the V-Stage. We do hear as well on the YC. And then we've got vibrato chorus and percussion. Let's turn both of those on. Make sure we're on a C3 here. I'm gonna turn the percussion and we'll turn a C3 on here as well. And then we have pre-drive and we have drive here on the V-Stage. You definitely get a little bit more from a bells and whistles perspective here on the V-Stage. On the YC, we have the ability to split and have an upper and a lower. So if I tap on this, you'll now see down in the bottom, and then it switches to the upper. On the V-Stage, we can split it actually into 3 parts. So with those on, we now have the pedal keys down here, and then we've got the lower and the upper. So you can actually split it into 3 different parts, and then we can just tap on the button to see the drawbars for each of those respective harmonic bar parts. So that's really cool. You kind of get a little bit extra there as well on the splitting capability. So we'll talk more about organs. We'll dig into some of the other organ types in later videos. But from a B3 organ perspective, I think the V-Stage is the winner. If we just do a little scoop with, maybe the first three here. I just think this sounds a little bit warmer and more full than the YC organ does. Let's turn the organ section off. Let's come over to key A, and we'll do a couple of piano and electric piano comparisons here. So we've got the CFX Grand. I'm going to turn the effects off here on the YC. And then we have the V-Stage piano. I need to remember to turn the effects off. I think my volume's a little toastier. So that's a grand. Let's find ourselves an upright. And we'll come in and we'll select an upright here as well. Do the recital upright. I really like the upright on the YC. Now keep in mind that the acoustic pianos are modeled on the V-Stage, samples on the YC. That is going to make a difference. I think you could spend some time in Piano Designer. You can do all sorts of setting changes in here, including tuning every individual key. And so keep that in mind, that maybe that's something that you could tweak the pianos here to make them sound a bit more realistic. But right out of the gate, I like to just kind of see what's there. We also have a felt upright. If I come over here to felt, I believe we have a felt here. You almost need effects on the acoustic piano because it's modeled. If I throw a little reverb. There's no reverb turned on for the YC. There is this damper resonance. You're hearing that a little bit, whereas, I mean, we do have damper resonance here. We could turn that up. So when it comes to customizing, you can change the tone, the EQ, the filter of your sound here in the keys section on the YC. But with the acoustic pianos, I mean, you have the whole Piano Designer here, so you can definitely do a lot more to customize the piano sounds. individually here on the acoustic piano than you do on the YC. It's more from tweaking the tone of the overall piano sound and then adding in a couple of effects. So we have two parts here, A and B. I'm not going to flip to B. I'm just going to stay in A, and we'll check out some electric pianos and some synth sounds in comparison to the V-Stage. So let's change categories to the electric piano. Let's turn the electric piano section on here. We'll kill any effects there. Let's choose a 75 Tine EP here and the 75 Rhodes Funky. Let's see what else we have here. Let's grab the 78. I don't think we have a 78. We've got a 79 here. And let's come over and check out a couple of whirlies, and then we'll come over to here and grab the reed. Turn the effects off. Turn that damper resonance off. Actually, I gotta kill the reverb. And then let's check out, we've got some clavs, so let's come over and check out the clav. And then let's check out digital. Let's see what we have here. And then coming over to the synthesizer section. So let's go with the Juno String 1. And then the Nowhere preset on the YC. Now it's difficult to compare synth sounds because every manufacturer approaches the synth sounds a little bit differently. If we just spin through a couple of these. This really has some beautiful synth tones in it, and this isn't bad. And then from a control perspective, it's pretty similar to what we can do with pianos, electric pianos. You can affect the tone, you can affect the EQ and filter with this single knob that's kind of a do-it-all knob. And then you have the effects. So let's talk effects a little bit. And again, on the synthesizer, I'm going to spend a little more time finding like tones so that I can compare them better in a separate video just on the synthesizers. So on the V-Stage, we have the total effects section, which gives us 3 effect slots, a multi-effect, delay, reverb. Then we have a master EQ. And then within the different parts, so the synthesizer has one multi-effect. The electric piano has its own multi-effect, tremolo, and amp simulation. And so effectively on, let's say, an electric piano, you could have a multi-effect here, a multi-effect here, tremolo, amp simulation, delay, reverb, plus the master EQ. So you've got a lot of effects capability specifically on the electric piano. With the synthesizer, you could have a multi-effects, delay, reverb, master EQ. Then within each part, you can also modify the EQ for that particular part. So a lot of control there. When we come over to the YC, within the keys section, we have, of course, our 2 layers here, A and B, and we have 2 effect slots for each of those layers respectively. Then we have an effect that we could turn on here. It's kind of a multi-effect. We can bunch of different effects we could choose on, similar to the multi-effect there, but I think you have more effects here on the V-Stage than you do in the YC. I could be wrong though, because there's 35 in here. I don't know the exact number on the multi-effect slot here on the V-Stage, but it's quite a few. So on this effect slot, we could then choose whether this applies to organ, key A, or key B. So we can kind of choose where this goes. The speaker amp simulation, same thing. We could choose which layer this applies to. And then the reverb, we could do the same. We could select it applying to everything or just an individual layer. Not as flexible. If we come over to the routing here, I just hit Shift and go to the effects routing, you can see we can specify the reverb and the delay, which of the parts get it, what amount of delay and reverb per part, as well as what amount of delay is applied before the reverb. So we can do a lot of different routing here on the V-Stage that we don't have here on the YC. Now moving to the right in the master EQ section, we actually have a master EQ section on the YC as well. Both of these, if we turned them on, these would affect the outputs of the YC or the V-Stage respectively. On the V-Stage, we have a master compressor that we can put on our outputs as well. We don't have that here on the YC. Moving into the center, we've got a bigger screen on the V-Stage, of course, little screen here on the YC. You're not doing as much in the screen. This is really geared towards a stage and using this on stage. There's not a whole lot of customization capability with the YC. Compared to the V-Stage, we can go into the menu and we can go into, let's say, the electric piano. We can hit edit, and we have a lot of different parameters. Piano designer for the EPs, the master effects, the routing of the master effects. You can see the options here are just crazy, but you've got to go into the menu to do that. There's only a couple or a few things that are out here on the front. So their focus has been to take the most commonly used parameters that you might tweak live and put those on the panel. With the YC, pretty much everything's here. I mean, we have a menu that you can go into, but it's pretty clunky and it's more for your global type settings. You can come in and do, different settings for each of your sections, but it's things like EQ filter control, and that's relating more to what this multifunction button does here. So exiting out of that, let's talk about a couple of other features here. So we have 8 live set buttons on the YC. These quickly call up sounds within a live set, and then we have pages of those. We have a similar thing here, 8 buttons here. We can go back and forth between our different banks of scenes, and scenes are kind of like live sets. It's a saved instance of what's here on the controls, same with a scene here. On the V-Stage, we also have EX scenes, which are almost like live scenes that save instantly as you change a parameter. We don't have that here on the YC. And then we also have scene chains. So here we could set up a scene chain, and then we can move between the sounds within that or the scenes within that chain with the back and forth buttons. We don't have that here on the YC. You could set up live sets. So you could click through them like this or move through them with the encoder here. Then click on them to select them, but it's not quite as capable as the scene functionality here on the V-Stage. Now, when it comes to splitting, we can come in here and we can set a split point on the YC, and we can split our sound, let's say our A and our B keys layers, we can split them on the keyboard. On the V-Stage, if we come into our split point screen here, we can split any of these parts to the left or the right and then define the split point for that part. So we could have the acoustic piano in everything. We could have the organ only in the lower. We could have the electric piano only in the upper. And then we could have a synth in like 3/4 of the keyboard. So the number of ways you can split your parts is pretty crazy in here, but it's a matter of coming in and configuring all of that. They give you this nice little screen which shows you all of your split points across your parts and how that's configured. We also have transpose functionality on both of them. Now, when it comes to software in the computer, the YC doesn't really have any dedicated software for it. You can import and export live sets and back up the YC, similar on the V-Stage. Now, when it comes to the V-Stage, we can import and export scenes as well, but there's not a dedicated software for the V-Stage. Maybe something to come in the future, building your own samples, things like that would be really cool to be able to import those in. But for now, you can do the scenes, you can build a scene, export that, save it to your computer to back that up. Now let's flip these around and take a look at the back of the inputs and outputs, talk about some of the things like built-in audio interfaces, as well as MIDI capability between these two keyboards. Now looking at the back of both of these keyboards, the V-Stage is up top here, the YC is down below. Let's talk audio inputs and outputs first. So on the V-Stage, we have a headphone port, same thing on the YC. Then we've got something similar here. We have XLR outputs as well as 1/4-inch outputs on our main outs. Here on the YC, we have XLR and 1/4-inch outputs. What we're missing on the YC is a second set of outputs. So theoretically, we have 4 outputs on the YC. We have the main outputs, either XLR or 1/4-inch, and then you have a second set that you can route different sounds to. Or let's say you wanted your organ to go out here into a Leslie, you could route that out of these sub outs. We don't have that on the YC. When we look at the inputs on the V-Stage, we have 2 line inputs, 1/4-inch line inputs, and a microphone input. On the YC, we have a left and right line input with a gain knob right here. We don't have a gain knob on the line inputs, but we do on the microphone. It's up on top of the keyboard. So you get the mic, you get the line inputs on the V-Stage, just line inputs on the YC. And I'll talk here in a minute about the audio interface capabilities of both these keyboards. And then from a device perspective, we have 2 foot controller inputs, and we have an assignable and a sustain pedal inputs here on the back. We also have traditional 5-pin MIDI in and out on the YC. On the Roland, we have an extra 5-pin MIDI. We have the same MIDI in out, and then we have an out to or a through. And then we have 4 control pedal or device inputs, your sustain or your hold, and then 3 assignables right here. And then looking at the USB capability of both of these, on the V-Stage, you have a USB-C or traditional USB, and then you have 2 device input external USB ports. So if you wanted to power a controller, for example, you could plug the controller in and the V-Stage will provide power for that controller, which is great because I'm often using a controller with these keyboards and I have to power it in another way with something like the YC. So that's great. And then going to the computer, you've got your choice of USB-C or regular USB. Now on the YC, we have a thumb drive for loading things like live sets, stuff like that. And then we have a USB port here where we could go to the computer and send the MIDI notes or use the audio interface that's built into the YC. So let's talk about that a little bit. The YC does have direct audio over USB for the audio interface, but that's about the extent of it. So the sounds within the YC, you can record those in a DAW over USB direct from the keyboard, which is a great feature to have. That way you don't need an audio interface if you're trying to record the sounds from the Yamaha YC. The V-Stage, on the other hand, is a little bit more expanded. It can do the same thing, but each of the parts sends out individually. So within your DAW, you see the organ, acoustic piano, electric piano, and synth as separate stereo outputs. So you have like multi-channel audio interface built into this keyboard, which is pretty phenomenal. So Roland V-Stage versus the Yamaha YC. What do you guys think? I'm really interested to hear. I know there's some gaps in the features. The V-Stage does provide more capability and more functionality in a bunch of the different areas, but they're both pretty solid stage keyboards, and I think it's valid to compare the V-Stage against the YC series. There's some similarities in the layout, in the controls, and as we were listening to the sounds, I think there's some similarities in the sounds as well. But what do you think is better? What do you like better for you? There may not be a wrong answer, but there is a right answer for you. And hopefully this video helps you decide between these two if you're trying to decide which one is right for you. If you've got any questions with either of these keyboards, feel free to throw those down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, stay inspired, and keep making that music.